Hello, everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Martijn Lofvers. I'm the Chief Trendwatcher of Supply Chain Media. I'm also the Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement, a quarterly magazine, but also a newsletter and a huge group within LinkedIn. I think over 50,000 members. And today we're going to talk about S&OP. And we have a great crowd. And we didn't even use the phrase AI to lure them in. But we're going to talk about how to implement S&OP without having the usual book and that kind of stuff. So we have a different approach. So I promise you this will be different than what you have seen before. And with me, I have another expert talk about this topic. It's Jan Kraaijeveld. He's sales director of Slimstock. That's a vendor of inventory management, S&OP. I'll talk about it later. So he has a lot of conversations about S&OP, and we did a roundtable about this topic with the 5 supply chain directors in last fall. So Jan, welcome.
Thanks, Martijn. Great to join this webinar again. Very happy to talk about this topic. I think we both had a lot of fun already in the preparation phase. So I think it's for both quite hard to keep it within the hour, right?
Yes. So a practical thing, this webinar will be recorded. The PDF will be made available, and I'm sure that you love some illustrations and some slides you can use internally. So at the end we have a Q&A, but you can ask questions along the way during our conversation. So if you have the questions, you see the chat functionality on the right hand side. I don't track this function, but one below the small text bubbles, you see the Q&A, and you can ask questions. And if these questions are in line of the conversation I will be having, I will ask these questions right away. If not, I'll reserve them for later on at the Q&A at the end. And lo and behold, we have an extra 30 minutes afterwards. So at 5 o'clock CET, European time, Jan and I will sit down in the virtual lounge, and we'll be sitting at table 1. So as of this point, I will put off my camera, and also Jan will do the same, so you can enlarge your screen, and then you have a better view of the presentation. So quick introduction of Slimstock. This is the SCM IT supply map I have been producing since 2011. So basically, I've mapped out all the major established software vendors on supply chain matters in Europe, the household names, the SAPs and Oracle, but also the niche players, etc. You have different lines, ERP, WMS, TMS, and so forth and so on. And basically, Slimstock is also positioned on this map. They started out already in the 90s, they started out with inventory management, and later on they expanded, and now they are also into S&OP field. So basically, this is why it's still important, S&OP. We have seen all kind of ripple effects on the downstream side and the upstream side. We've always seen COVID, we've seen war in Ukraine, Gaza, all kind of black swans. And you have seen all the ripple effects as a result of that. And basically, you see now volatility on the demand side, but also volatility on the supply side. So basically, that's the reason why S&OP is still a hot topic. Jan, if you will discuss these things with supply chain directors, your customers, what are the topics they are referring to the most?
I think we're still, from the COVID part, there are still a lot of things that are on the agenda. The same goes for, all the things are happening. I think the most important part, we will go there in a couple of minutes, Martijn. I think the geopolitical stuff is, I think, the most common, agenda point for now, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's looking to what's happening in the US and all around the world. I heard some things about deals with the Ukraine and so on. So I think that will be a lot of, a big ripple effect for the next period.
Yeah. So if you look at this slide, basically what we have seen in the last 2 years because of shortages, there were articles published in the USA. We are going from just in time to just in case, and that green lighted all kind of buying of all parts and business stuff, all you can imagine. So now all the warehouses are overstocked mostly, and most of the times not the stuff you are able to sell. So basically, that is what the current situation right now. So things have changed. If you look at the slide, I have published this slide already since 2020 and expanded on this.
Time for a new one, Martijn.
Yeah. But lo and behold, we have seen the water surface, and under the surface there are all kind of geopolitical frictions. You have tectonic plates, and they're shifting, etc. And you have to look what's below the water. And now what we see in February 2025, there's a new eruption, and it's called Donald Trump.
Yep.
With all the tariff announcement and the kind of stuff, and we don't know what's going to happen with that. To some people, it might be unexpected, this kind of eruption. In my opinion, I already predicted 4 years ago this will happen. So this is what we see right now. And now, this is the thing, and maybe you can explain better. What is happening if we look at S&OP?
I think always the main reason, Martijn, to talk about S&OP, or at least to planning and to inventory, there should be, let's say, there's always a reason to talk about it, right? Because I think you and I can talk about for the next week about this topic. Mm-hmm. I think there will be a lot of people in the audience who can spend a lot of time on, let's say, thinking about this nice field of expertise. But from a business point of view, there should be, like you said in the introduction, there should be a ripple effect to start thinking about this kind of stuff. Because if you're not aware of what the things is happening around you, you can focus on the daily execution, and that's fine, and that's very relevant. But I think it's quite important to keep in mind, and we saw it. I think it's already 3 years ago, Martijn, that we did this. Let's say this big
survey.
Yeah, the survey, right? To see where the disconnect is. I think, but I think you see the same if it's a multinational or a local player. I think everybody's struggling with the same elements, right?
Yeah. So basically, we did a survey together with Slimstock among 175 wholesale and manufacturing and retail companies in the Netherlands, and you clearly saw there's a disconnect between business strategy, supply chain strategy, and inventory strategy. And S&OP should close that gap. And basically, we did see a similar thing in a McKinsey survey in 2011. There's at 80% of the companies surveyed didn't have a close connection between business strategy and supply chain strategy or their resources. So since 2011, hardly anything has changed, and that's why S&OP is still relevant. So here you see, you have a business planning and you have detailed planning, and the disconnect there should be S&OP in place. Sometimes people say, no, we need IBP. Do you talk about IBP, integrated business planning, or still S&OP, or is it all the same to you?
Yeah, well, no, it's definitely not the same, Martijn. I think we discussed it in let's say in the preparation for this. You can talk about, let's say, nice initiatives to go to abroad or a new country to sell your stuff. And I think from an S&OP perspective, I think it's quite, for a lot of people, a lot of companies, still difficult to manage budget and, let's say, timing over the lead time. Say if you go to IBP, it will be more, let's say, a broader initiative to manage risk, etc. I think it's quite next level. So for me, it's definitely not the same, but I think it's good to let's say to keep in mind that maybe the S&OP or IBP or everything what we discussed today, it's not that it's like the golden rule, right? I think we have to keep that in mind before we start this webinar. Let's say if we walk into this webinar, it's just a way of, let's say, trying to get a little bit more grip on the things you are doing, right?
Yeah. So basically, I explained to my colleagues, they asked me a few weeks ago, so what's the difference between S&OP and IBP? So, S&OP is about volumes.
Yep.
Say I'm going to produce 1 million items this year, but I could also say I'm not going to produce or sell 1 million items. I'm going to sell for $10 million dollars or euros that could be 10 euros per piece. But then when you talk about financial numbers, you can say, okay, but I can sell more of this kind or in this market, etc. So you have more scenarios and in that kind of field than with the S&OP. So that's the difference. S&OP is in volumes, in items, in pieces, in products, whereas in IBP you translate it into euros or dollars, and then you get a different kind of conversation. Also talk about risk and more scenarios. But you know,
before we, I think that this is the main thing. If you trying to explain, I think the most thing that we run into is that there is a lot of, if you talk about talking the right language, I think it's therefore you can use a book to manage to go out to the title of this webinar. You can use the book to get the right, let's say, phrases or the right terms that you talk about the same stuff. But then implementing is a whole different story, and I think therefore it's quite important to realize that there are a lot of elements within planning that we should let's say, maybe it's a task for you as a supply chain media to maybe come up with some kind of a handbook. This is what we talk about. It maybe the Apex 2.0 or something.
Yeah, no, that's why I have my news items online. You know, Oliver Wright has been writing books about S&OP since the 80s. I have a lot of them.
Since we were young, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, but the thing is, maybe I have read some of them, but you know, most people don't have the time to read all this book. That's why we have a webinar of 60 minutes and explain more stuff than can be
this
mentioned.
is 60 minutes, so it's S&OP implementing in 60 minutes. Yeah, that will be maybe that will be the next title of a book or something. Yeah.
So basically, maybe explain, you know, long-term planning S&OP. So what is your explanation with this?
Yeah, well, I think it's if you talk about planning, if you talk about, let's say, 9 out of 10, if I talk with companies, we'll be focusing on technology, and then I will ask about the process. But I think it's starting with the people. And if you are running to a supply chain department, or you will be in a CFO role, or you will be in, let's say, in procurement. If you are talking about, let's say, we have this supply chain game, and you will play the game with a couple of, let's say, chains, and you just manage demand over time with one SKU, you see how difficult it is. And then if you look to, let's say, long-term planning, and you want to act as a team, or you want to act as let's say, as a company with one main target or one goal, I think it's quite, it's an open door, but it should be done together. And I think for you goes the same, Martijn. If you talk with your team, you can manage you can go out and talk about, let's say, this nice initiative. But if you don't talk your team about nice things that you really want to do on next week or next month on the new version of the magazine, it's also teamwork, right?
Yeah. You know, and it's interesting to see, you know, this slide will give some insight. You know, it's a lot. For one thing, S&OP is a long-term planning environment. So it's a business decision-making process, and you know, you have a horizon between 3 or 18 months. So it's not short-term. So that's the you know, the horizon of this kind of planning process. And you have different kind of people at the table, and you know, if it
people at the table is a nice thing, Martijn. I think we have talked about this, like this. We're gonna talk about the roulette and the poker stuff, but I think that's the most difficult part to put your cards on the table and hold nothing back on. Let's say, well, I expect this and that, but that's the whole thing I really know, and I have a consensus. I really give all the insights that I have, and I think that's maybe. Again, we can talk about tooling, we can talk about ABC, XYZ. That's all fine. It's the tooling, but to really get insights and to really plan on these terms and this kind of stuff, I think it's the most difficult part for me. But we will talk about it later on, how we maybe can act as a team, or at least
but it's good to mention. It's good to mention that all these departments should be at the table. Otherwise, you know, it doesn't make sense as a process. And I think that's the main thing. So, you know, and I translated this in this illustration. Most of the times, it still look like poker, playing poker.
Yeah.
You know, sales is sweating like hell. You know, because people ask him, you know, how much are you going to sell, and he or she doesn't know, but who should know? So this is the thing, and still after writing 15 years about S&OP, most companies I talk to are still using a lot of Excel. Sometimes a part of next to their APS, the advanced planning systems, or even if they have some sort of tool, they still use the Excel. They extract it.
So Excel is one of the most used things, and I think from 9 out of 10 perspectives, I think it's a quite a good thing. Or Power BI now, we also see that a lot of times. But it's a process on its own, and I think to find a connect with the, let's say, the real execution and the planning and everybody on the same table. you should be aware of getting the right data, and then maybe Excel is the right thing for now. I don't know. Maybe it's strange from my point of view, but if what's the alternative?
Yeah. Well, with the rise of Gen AI and with ChatGPT and Copilot and DeepSeek, etc., we will see some major changes in the next year. I promise you, because I think that will accelerate. So yes, you can do amazing stuff with Gen AI nowadays. 1 year ago, ChatGPT couldn't even calculate. They have to have a Wolfram as an extra add-on to do simple calculations. Now they can do the most complex calculations within GTP4. So it's happening right now. So it will change. But then again, the people at the table have to understand what kind of tooling they need. But still, it's like S&OP poker.
And Martijn, and from your perspective, you oversee the market. You see a lot of companies using, let's say, S&OP maybe as it used to be. Do you see then that the board is also involved in, let's say, this kind of decisions and in the tooling, or is this more like a control tower stuff, or how does that work? Let's say, how do you see that?
Well, yeah, the more advanced companies, we had an S&OP conference last November with some interesting case studies on stage.
Yeah.
And the more advanced companies, they have a CEO who really asks for the data, and basically they use some sort of Power BI environment to extract it from S&OP software to report back to the CEO, the CFO. But like, for example, the CEO of Friesland Campina, he really knows S&OP. He understands it. He asks for the figures on a monthly basis. So he trusts the data. And maybe, to make it more fancy, they use the Power BI tool. But in the end, it's coming from S&OP software as a basis. So, and there are more companies who are more advanced in the matter. But getting back to that, the basis is not the tooling. The basis is how to get people at the table and how to know how to get them at the table in the right way. And that's what we're going to discuss later.
Yeah.
These are the steps. Maybe you can go through in brief matter.
Yeah, that's a good one, Martijn. I think if you talk about an S&OP process, there is a lot of, let's say, if you talk first step, data gathering, I think we can spend the next hour or maybe next week about complaining about data is not right. So, but for sure, if you want to, and that's one of the key elements for today, if you want to get started with S&OP and you want to implement it and you want to spend a lot of time or maybe a fortune on getting the right data in, it will be a long shot to get everybody aboard, or at least to create some nice understanding about the topic. So maybe that's a good way of keep that in mind. If you are aiming for 100% the right data, we should talk about the one set of numbers, correct? But maybe, and that's a good part. We will talk about it later on. If you talk to different kind of people in the way of, let's say, if you're very focusing on and making analysis, you cannot make assumptions on but I think it's maybe 1 or 2. It should be a 1 or a 2. But still, the data gathering is an important part. And like I said, just before we started yesterday, I visited the company and they said, well, for us, the first step in S&OP is demand review. And then sometimes I think that I understand where it's coming from, but I think, or at least Martijn, we both have a kind of a crush on the product management review. If you talk about this kind of decisions, you cannot step over it, but it's also a difficult one. But in my opinion, it all starts there, right? To have the right portfolio in, because otherwise the rest of the whole, let's say, process doesn't make any sense.
No, and an interesting point. These are some steps, and they are very useful. You should take these steps to get this S&OP process going. My observation, I think we have nearly 300 registrants for this webinar, and 80% is from supply chain. Hardly any people from sales. So that's remarkable. Or IT. You will only
or finance, Martijn. Think
finance,
about that. Finance is also one of the key players who is not, let's say, not interested in this kind of thing, unless you are connecting the financial plan. But it's also one to keep in mind, because in my opinion, a lot of finance people don't like about these kind of steps. That's maybe too much of supply chain party still, but.
All right, and now we come to the greatest part of this hour, because I've studied a lot of books. Oliver White has written them. Slimstock has published a book about S&OP. So basically, a month has 4 weeks. So basically, you have four reviews within a month, and I call them like this: a product review in week 1, demand review in week 2, supply review in week 3. And financial review or an executive consolidation review in week 4, and then the month has ended, and then you go on, and then they have the next month. So this is basically S&OP process. And some say, you have 5 or 6 steps, but you only have 4 weeks in a month. So basically, stick to this, and and this is what it looks like. And basically, you see the different departments connected to each phase. So product review, it's marketing and R&D, development. And that is the most neglected step in the most S&OP process. Why? S&OP processes used to be balancing demand and supply. That's it. But basically, the most important step, and we have discussed it in earlier webinars, is the product review. And we get to that later. And then you get demand review. Okay, you have your forecast, so your statistical forecasting and your demand planning, etc. Then you get your supply review, and then you get your whole bill of material and your MRP runs. I got some questions, very detailed, in the Q&A. And then you have your financial review, also often quite neglected. Why? Because you have next to this a financial planning and analysis cycle by finance. But you see the different kind of business responsibilities next to it. So I've read a lot of books about HR and Myers-Briggs, etc. So I used these colors, and we had this same conversation during the roundtable in the fall.
Yeah.
So you can use the Myers-Briggs colors to attach it to each phase. So yellow, that's product review. Demand review is typically red. That is a sales environment. Then you have supply review. That's green. And then you have the financial review. So basically, and now we get to the party, why do we still struggle with S&OP? Well, this is Myers-Briggs. You see different kind of people in it. And for people who don't know Myers-Briggs, next to that, you see the different kind of types of the different colors. So yellow is about intuition. It's marketing, looking at the field, we have new ideas, launching new stuff, etc. It's about gut feeling, etc.
Yeah.
And then you have, the nurturer. That's a salesperson going out, have a cup of coffee, do some nice conversations, trying to break through, that very outgoing. And then you have the green party, supply chain people. They try to be very steady and have an overview. And then you have the financial people, blue, the analysts. So I have, a position, this Briggs Myers, and I never seen this before. And this is as a result of the round table.
Yeah, I think it was a great conversation, Martijn, because we do it within Slimstock, and I think a lot of people who are joining the webinar are thinking the same. You have management drives and Myers-Briggs, and a lot of, let's say, to keep somebody in a kind of a box. But I think to understand why it's sometimes a little bit when there's friction, or try to understand the other side of the table, is that somebody is sometimes a little bit acting different because their quality of the person, or at least where they are aiming for, is a quite different approach. And I think we all have this. There's also written a lot of books about it, and I think it's good for an understanding in this kind of, let's say, we now talk about S&OP, but I think it's all daily life to manage the expertise, or let's say the qualities of your colleague or somebody else within the company. To really understand what the. I don't want to really put somebody in a real box, because I think there should be maybe more ways. But I think the whole setup for this webinar is to get everybody thinking about maybe this is good for my understanding. If I talk to finance and I am, let's say, if the same goes for supply chain, if you go to sales, if you go to marketing, we all. It's about they think, they feel, they have a gut feeling. That's fine, but that's their quality. And if you talk to the more analyst, or the most, let's say, detailed person, it's sometimes there's a little bit of a friction. I think we all understand each other quite better if you talk about in this kind of pictures, right?
Yeah, if you talk about sales, they are overselling because that's their job. They are very enthusiastic. They believe in it. The finance people are very conservative, underselling. Oh no, I don't think so. Hopefully, the supply chain people are in between, more realistic. And the marketing, they don't know. They have a great idea to put something new into the market. So this is our feeling. So basically, when you look at mixed Myers-Briggs, there are all kind of things how to talk between red and yellow and blue and red, etc. So that is something we have to dig into, but we have more to explain.
I think, Martijn, you always also had this picture about this soccer team, right? About the CEO or the supply chain. But I think the CEO, 9 out of 10, if this is a finance person or let's say a sales driven person, I think it's quite important to realize how this S&OP or how your company is running, to keep a little bit, try to understand what's happening on the board. And I think you will have more insights on how your company is running. For sure, there will be maybe it should be maybe a PhD or somebody who's really detailed in this kind of stuff. But there's a lot of things that you can maybe put in place or in perspective if you think about in this kind of way.
Yeah. So this slide I presented at my conference in last fall. So basically, we created this slide. Place your bet. Every supply chain practitioner was receiving 5 chips. So basically, I asked them to place down their chips, place your bets. So where do you want to improve your S&OP process? And you see, well, the 4 steps we mentioned earlier, and I dissected in 4 elements. And based on that, they placed their bets. Well, here it is. So my first thing was, most people, especially when you are demand planning, they place their bets in AI, demand forecasting with AI. But later on, they say, okay, maybe we are not ready for AI, and then they said, okay, maybe we should place it more in product review. So this is what we did. What was your feeling when we did that?
Yeah, I think, Martijn, if you are in supply chain and you're a little bit of red colored, I think it will be an all-in choice. And if you're a little bit conservative, it will be, let's say, you spread it out a little bit.
Yeah.
So, and as you see, always, if you think about your first bet and then you will get in contact with your peers or maybe with somebody else as an expert, then maybe you will be rebetting. So maybe for next time, if you play this, maybe you should have 1 bet. It's an all-in thing, maybe to make it a little bit more of a yes or no decision. Because otherwise, to spend 5, let's say, the 5 pieces on the whole board, they're still fine. But I know why you made this. It's about also getting insights on the different perspectives. It is right about why do you choose for this? I think that's the most important question about this slide.
Yeah, and basically what we did, we had 6 people at the table. Each had his own placemat, and they had 5 chips each. So they placed the bets, and then they get within 5 minutes they get into the discussion. Why do you place it on demand forecasting or some other boxes, and why did you place this and that? So basically, this is the way you can do it internally. So after our event, a lot of people ask me, "Can I take this home?" Yes, take the chips home, take it home, and play it within your own team, across teams, etc. Because marketing will place their bets differently than sales or finance or supply chain. So basically, then you have a better conversation among each other.
Yeah.
This is your slide about science and art. Maybe you can explain it.
Yeah, I think, Martijn, it's about the colors from the disc or the Myers-Briggs, but also if you want to you have 2 worlds. I think Slimstock and a lot of other vendors are all from the science part. So you can calculate based on patterns, on rules, on making predictions, on empirical evidence. That's fine, but it's still based on science. And if you go to the other end of the table and you will talk to marketing, sales, or somebody else who is responsible for, let's say, market input, they will all talk about, I think, and it will be a customer, there will be the top customer for next year. And I think my expectation is, and those are the key elements that a really science person, or maybe a blue person, can be a blue person, doesn't have to be, but I think it's a blue person who is really scientific. I think it's quite important to keep in mind why these worlds are disconnected, or at least why it's not a versus. I think you need both. I talked about it on Innovate for last year about the differences and why you need each other. But to keep this in mind, and if you really talk about the strong points of, let's say, somebody who's really, really, really blue, he is not into, let's say, surprises. He's very analytical. And if you talk to somebody else on the other end of the table, again, who is really, but I want to go out and I want to create new stuff, or let's say I want to introduce a new item. The first question that this scientific person will say, yeah, well, that's all fine, but can you tell me what the forecast is, what the lead time is, what the MOQ is, all based on this objective parts. So therefore, I try to connect these kind of worlds, but I think we all have a feeling about this perspectives.
Yeah, when I look at this slide, I see, AI in planning, that's the left side. We are already, if you are using APS, Advanced Planning and System, you already use some sort of artificial intelligence. When you do optimization in scheduling, etc., that is some sort of AI. That could be linear programming, heuristics, whatever. That's the blue side. The right side, is more like Gen AI using Midjourney and DALL-E. So I think, even in AI, you have a science and an art perspective.
Yep.
All right. But basically, it's about balancing. Maybe you can explain this.
But the balancing act, but Martijn, I think everybody who's in supply chain, or at least listening today or watching, has the same, let's say, the balancing act. If we talk about inventory optimization or to supply chain planning at all, it's always about finding the right balance between demand and supply. So you can have the 100% forecast, but if your supplier is not supplying you on the right time, then in my opinion, but I'm not popular with this opinion, if you have the 100% right forecast, but your inventory is not in, good for you from the demand planning perspective, but the supply is not there, we're not planning the right service levels to our customers. So, and I think an S&OP process, so therefore it's a process, is to find this balance between all these elements, because there is a forecast, there are actual orders, there is sales coming in, expecting a lot of maybe a tender or let's say a new customer coming in. We have all this, let's say, inventory. We didn't talk about, let's say, capacity or resources. I think from the supply side, we don't have walls from plastic, or we have not a limited maybe manufacturing capacity. So there is always let's say, I think the main goal is to find a good balance. And the balance, to be honest, Martijn, I hate balancing, but it's more, let's say, trying to, for everybody to keep everybody happy. Maybe that's the point. But I think you see it on a daily level. If you talk to let's say again, to the multinationals or the local players, I think everybody's struggling with the same issues.
But when I look at this interesting slide, we had this conversation during our conference last year. Some companies are, focusing on forecasting accuracy. They want to move up from 60% to 80%, but in the end, doesn't make any sense at all, because the volatility is so high that the forecasting accuracy is useless. So I think we have to split the whole portfolio. Where can you have an accuracy, a high level accuracy, and where do you think, okay, we have to buffer, etc. So I think this balancing act should be also getting back to the portfolio, should be different and segmented per SKU, hopefully, but at least on a product group level. So you have your fast movers and your slow movers. I think that also we have to differentiate between slow movers and fast movers, geographies, lands, etc.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the right point, Martijn. We always talk about this process, and you talk about companies, and sometimes people have, let's say, 100,000 of SKUs. And still, my main, always the main, let's say, example. If you want to manage one SKU over one location with a couple of customers with one uncertain supplier, you can see how difficult that is. And we all talk about this nice supply chain stuff and the nice supply chain planning stuff, but it's still about basic elements. And if you talk to, let's say, supply chain people, and maybe from the next slide, if we don't have an overall plan that we are really connected, again, for me, S&OP, it's all the yeah, we had it in the preparation. What's the alternative? But you have to connect all these kind of elements to get the right, let's say, profitability. Because at the end, if you have shareholders or you have, let's say, an owner, it's not that we're doing things for free. So maybe it's good to have insights from each other. So if you talk about operations or to sales or to finance, what's their why? What's their need? What's their, let's say, what's their point to be on the table to talk about this kind of stuff? And if you don't, if you just about rationalize this and just go in and you will be from a data phase, and you will talk to sales, and you're not right because the forecast is always wrong and you're always aiming for the wrong points. That's not the way how you can work together. And maybe call me and so maybe I'm too green in this area. I want to have a nice overview, but sometimes you need the friction to get the maximum out of it. But maybe that's also one for the supply chain or the S&OP responsible, who is responsible for the S&OP process, to have everybody prepared on the table to create the right decisions in a structured way. And that's a nice phrase, but to keep that in practice, I think, again, back to the title of this webinar, it's not written in any book how to do that.
No.
Maybe you have the answer, Martijn. Maybe we'll talk about this for 40 minutes now, and that you have all the answers, but...
No, I don't. But, look at it, it's like, when you talk about sales, okay, sales is always complaining, etc. So I don't know how much I will say. I used to be an editor of a CRM magazine. It's almost 20 years ago. So basically, you can ask how many salespeople are using their CRM extensively. How willing are they to put all their conversations into a CRM system? And you have nice sales funnels, etc., with the likelihood and percentages of conversion ratio. But we all know salespeople don't like to fill out all these CRM systems like Salesforce.com and you name it. So that's one thing. But you have to deal with it because you are depending on what they are hearing in the market.
Yep.
So and that's getting back to Myers-Briggs. You have to deal with sales and finance. You know that maybe they have an alternative process called financial planning and analysis next to S&OP or IBP. You have to realize that. So otherwise, if you don't know, then you are, probably you are fooled thinking, the S&OP process doesn't work, etc., etc. So that's my observation looking at this slide. And the major point with this slide to me is, a lot of people talk about one number planning. No. It's not one number planning. You have different kind of scenarios because all shit is happening nowadays with Trump, in the White House. So you have to talk about scenarios, but it's good to have one plan. So that's the thing, one number planning. No, stop it. You have scenarios. The world will be different tomorrow, next week, but you have to have a plan. That's the message of my thinking.
Yeah, good one, Martijn. And I think it's quite important to keep in mind that a lot of things about these S&OP meetings or a lot of things fail because everybody is still focusing on a daily operation.
Yep.
And we talk about days of inventory, we talk about service level, and we talk about these rush orders, etc. But there is a lot of things, let's say, below the iceberg that's also quite important. Maybe it's not seen, but that's the scenario thinking, the demand planning. There's all maybe different kind of stuff going on to fulfill these KPIs. And that's always KPI is always a hard one. It always starts with a 9 and up. And we're aiming for some kind of, let's say, service level or days of inventory. But 9 out of 10, it will be about daily operations. And to talk about a long-term plan, as you mentioned in the beginning, I think for a lot of people, it's also quite difficult to manage.
Yeah. So again, this overall plan has to be a horizon longer than your budget. So it has to be 18 months out. If you or at least you this budget for this year, if we want to make our numbers for this year because of our stakeholders, that's the horizon you should discuss. So basically, are we going to make it this year? Are we realize our growth, etc.
Yeah.
There's an interesting question. I hear it before. Who should be the best S&OP process owner?
We talked about it on the S&OP day we did in December, and I think naturally you think somebody who is quite high in ranking or from the organization point of view. But I think 9 of 10, it doesn't have to be in a rank. Maybe it's somebody who is maybe what's the right? We have a Dutch word for it, Martijn. Het oliemannetje of vrouwtje. How to translate that? Or the what keeper?
do it all. Yeah.
Yeah, the number 10 on the midfield. If you look to a soccer game, 9 out of 10 the midfield or the number 10, you won't see him in the game, but he's the most important person on the field.
Yeah. I think the CEO has to be in favor of this all. Call it IBP or S&OP.
You cannot be the owner.
No. Right? It's not the owner. That's the ambassador or whatever, or the sponsor. But if you have a eager beaver who is very powerful with Power BI and can make it happen, basically the process owner should be the one who can manage Myers-Briggs. He was standing in the middle, who was looking around. How do I talk to red? How do I talk to yellow? How do I talk to green? And how to talk to blue? And yes, in the first phases of S&OP, the supply chain director has the most connections within the company with all these different departments. So he or she should be the one to be, the initiator of all this. But the supply chain director, most of the time, that's not the eager beaver who's doing the weekly basis
data crunching, etc. No, it should be a team, maybe a right hand or a left hand, where you can based on the maybe the colors. I don't want to go out for let's only these 4 colors. You can make it more than that, but if you have a really blue person in your team, it can be very good on analyzing the data. If you have maybe a green person, he or she can be the, let's say, with nice communication skills to get everybody on the table. Yeah. And sometimes I think you and I are a little bit too red sometimes, and it will be shouting a lot about a new initiatives. But all this kind of stuff working together, I think that's the way how to operate. And maybe the one who can do this the best, it's also a job of a lot of experience. Same if you look to a new football coach, you can learn it from the course in the national squad, that's fine. But if you're on your own and you want to manage a team of maybe 10, 20, 50 people, there's a lot of experience next to that. The same goes for this. Back to the title, it's not only reading a book, it's not just reading a lot of stuff and then you implement it. It's a lot of experience.
No, and I think, I also had written a blog about it. S&OP is like a relay race, 4 times 100 meters, and then the month is gone and then you go to the next month. How to keep the people inspired to go to the next round, because it's a relay race for the next indefinite years. So, people would like to do this month by month. That's something, that should be the process owner.
Yeah.
And if you look, in theory and practice, people talk about, can you buy it? Can you buy S&OP software?
Yeah, we have a nice conversation on this, Martijn. I think the numbers are not maybe not so sophisticated as everybody's thinking. For me, the most important part is that if you focus on the technology, that you think that the technology will solve your, let's say, way of how your vision will come back to the execution part. I think that's quite irrelevant. But same goes if you talk to, let's say, Slim4 or TMS or WMS. If you're focusing really 100% or let's say the most part of the technology, I think it's quite important, especially with S&OP, that your people skills and that you feel focusing on the teams and how is your process running. And yes, the data should be correct, but still, if you don't have the organization and the teams and the process in place, it will be a tough one to implement. Or do you see it differently?
No. And I know Slimstock with Slim4, you're processing thousands or millions of SKUs for all your users, etc. So that should be done, but on a certain level, and that is on SKU level. I think on a product group level, your data is less accurate, or more accurate, I would say. And then you can talk about that level. So I think it's also the matter of at which level are you discussing your forecast and your plans.
That's a funny phrase, Martijn, because if you talk to, let's say, hypothetically, it will be a supply chain person who is relatively blue. They can, at least in my opinion, can be very good in analyzing the safety stocks or the focus bias or something really on short term.
Mhm.
But if you go to an S&OP process and you will make decisions about the budget which is 18 months away, the next weekend, I can assure you, if you go from the product management to the demand review, there's nothing happened on a daily level.
No.
And if you look to the quality to the quadrants, I think you also have to keep in mind that some people will be bored, as you know, if they talk into this kind of meetings. It's quite difficult actually to set up different kind of meetings, because again, it's very attractive to go to a daily level, to let's say operational level. And I think that's a one thing to keep in mind.
And then this is a great overview of the different kind of plans. Maybe you can explain it.
I think everybody who's working in a company, or at least the companies we visit, Martijn, or I'll talk to myself, there's always a nice financial plan. There is a business plan. There is somebody who's responsible for inventory. He has a great, or she has a great plan. But to connect all this kind of, to make the puzzle, to create from one plan, still it's a maybe one step too far if you don't have any process in place. But you feel now, if you are on the table and back to the poker game, and not everybody is putting his total plan, then it will be at least to start from the beginning, it will be a failure.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, at least I want to encourage everybody to start with it, because you have to start somewhere, and maybe it's connecting the, let's say, the engineering plan to maybe a business plan, to find one SKU, or one maybe one level up, that you can find each other on a different kind of way of entering it. But I think for everybody it's quite important to collaborate and to communicate. I think communication maybe is even more the most important part, the word we didn't mention before, but communication about all these departments, to talk about the right elements. For me, this is quite relevant to get S&OP up and running.
Yeah, and to me, when I look at this slide, every participant from all the different kind of business functions should open up their plans. They should put the cards on the table.
Yeah.
And then you can make this puzzle. Otherwise, if you all play your own game with your own KPI, you won't get there. That's the message of this slide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still, again, talk about the Myers-Briggs, Martijn. If you are, let's say, from the blue part, and you will go to a salesperson, and you will be focusing on details, we both know what will be happening. So, and then not all the cards will be on the table. So, still, I think it's to keep that in mind, that there will be a lot of let's say a lot of things to win if you talk about this kind of stuff.
No, but you, 2 slides earlier you talked about one overall plan. That should be combining all these parts of the puzzle. If not, everybody has his own plan and his own piece of the puzzle, etc. It's his or her own agenda. I think that's the whole part. If you don't open up, if you don't script the service, okay, what are you really wanting to do? What is your real plan? Then we won't get there. And maybe that's a nice bridge to this one. Maybe you can explain the KPIs and the KBIs.
Yeah, I mentioned it before, Martijn. I think KPIs is always a hard one, right? If days on inventory, you can make it manage OTIF. There are so many KPIs. What we learned, I think, a couple of years ago with Jan Stentoft, and I think a lot of other people, we don't talk about the behavior part. How should we behave in this kind of meetings? Mm-hmm. It's a different angle than the colors that we just described. But for me, a key behavior indicator, I think that's also a good one to mention, right? And maybe to think about, how should I behave in this kind of meetings? Because I can be very focusing on maybe my target or my margin or something else, but maybe my role or my behavior should be supportive, or maybe more analytical, or whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I think this is also a part that I didn't read it in any book. Did you?
No, well, Professor Jan Stentoft, he's from Denmark, and he has written articles about it. That's the only only article I've read about it, not in the other S&OP books. But basically, he has written an article, and he has done some analytics, some surveys among companies. So now, how people communicate in a proper tone. Are they prepared for the meetings? Did they attend scheduled meetings? Are they mentally present at meetings? Did they met their deadlines for handing over information, that kind of stuff? So he has a whole checklist of behaviors for this kind of meetings, for this whole process. So that's this whole, and also he mentioned internally oriented KPIs and externally oriented KPIs. So basically, it's all about commitment, communication, behaviors in this kind of process. Are you willing to participate?
Yeah.
And when I look at this slide, I hate, KPIs. So most of the companies still have conflicting KPIs. So sales want to sell as much as possible. Logistics want to have as low as inventory as possible. That's conflicting. That's first you have to find out, do we have conflicting KPIs? And if you get back to the parts of the puzzle with your own plans, and as a financial analyst, you are very blue, and you have to find out, where do we find conflicting KPIs?
Yeah.
And that's the starting part over there.
Yeah. I think that's quite hard to manage as a supply chain responsible. I sometimes read it in the magazine, Martijn, if you interview let's say the supply chain directors, it's always about the balancing act, and also about managing all your, let's say, different responsibilities. It's about if you to I can't find the word, duurzaamheid, what is that?
Sustainability.
Sustainability, thank you. About sustainability, to act to the magical triangle, if you talk about cash and service and cost, and then sustainability is also next on the agenda. It's always difficult to manage. And I think all these kind of elements, you have to have a big, let's say, again, there's another book written about it. It's a lot of things that you have to manage. And sometimes it's also about the individual level, let's say, how do I respond to that? Or how do I get everybody involved? And I think communication is a really important part here.
Yeah. And when I look at this, and we have discussed it earlier, what I see when I talk to companies, the real bottleneck is profitability per product profitability, customer profitability. If you don't know what the real profitability of your SKU is, you have a hard time discussing with sales as a supply chain person, and the other way around. So, and now we get to large data, big data, AI.
Yeah.
Basically, what we need now, you have variable costs, and then you have to allocate it to product groups or even SKUs. Then you finally have an overview of your whole portfolio. What is the profitability on an SKU level? What is the profitability of a channel, of a customer, whatever? And you mentioned Slim4 has now this matrix where you can instantly push the button and you have an overview, a matrix 3x3 of your ABC on a product level and a customer at the same time.
Yeah.
And then your CC articles, loss-making products to loss-making customers, you can get rid of tomorrow. So that's a good point.
Yeah, I think Martijn, I think you're right. It's about let's say we talk about segmentation later on, but all these kind of elements, you will be able to have a lot of insights for everybody on the table in the S&OP meetings, but still to communicate and to get everybody aligned and to have everybody, let's say, making the right decisions and to get the preparation right. All this kind of stuff, I think it's everybody who is running S&OP knows what I mean. But if you are trying to get there or you want to implement it, it's so nice to talk about to peers. And I think you are, for me, as an example, if you're with the Supply Chain Directors Club, there are so many peers who have already done this trick a couple of times. I think those are the most key elements to keep in mind to how to set it up.
Yeah, and getting back to Myers-Briggs and KPIs, I think this slide explains it a bit better. Maybe you can talk about it.
Yeah, still, but you can. There is a lot of insights on this. Maybe we can let's say in detail. Well, we have this individual level. So how do you let's say if you are in the meeting, how do I contribute? But also on, let's say, if you are in the meeting with more people, how should I behave? How do I prepare the meeting? I had this a great example of a company who sells bikes. They're in the, let's say, Deventer Zwolle area. they have a really good process, and the process owner, he is really taking everybody's responsibility to prepare the meeting. If you're not prepared, you're not welcome in the meeting. But for me, there's also a behavior thing. If you're not able to get yourself motivated to get the right analysis in before you enter the meeting, then you should not be joining. So for me, there's also maybe it's not a KPI, but it's all about how you act within the company, and all this kind of stuff. Maybe it's good to keep that in mind, or to maybe think about for your own participation in the S&OP meeting. How is my behavior on these different levels?
Yeah. So this is the final slide before we get to the Q&A. I see a lot of questions. Some are very detailed. So basically, this is what it should look like. It should be a happy environment at S&OP, and not say, oh, Jesus, every week, we have to be there. No. We are managing the company. We make sure that at the end of this year, we make our budget. And basically what this slide is saying, you have to dissect and segment your portfolio and your customers way better than than some companies are doing right now. So it's not one supply chain, it's not one product group. No, you have different kind of supply chains with make to forecast, make to order, make to demand, etc. So basically, this is what it should look like. And then the different players, finance, sales, marketing, are eager to see how it falls out. And then, of course, you have some scenarios to play. So this is how it should look like.
Yeah, I fully agree, Martijn. I think we did this exercise about the supply chain mapping in the past, to see where your stuff is coming from. If you order one article from, let's say, the Philippines, and some other article to make the order complete is in your local warehouse, all these kind of elements, it's from make to order from make to stock, or from delivered from stock. There are so many key elements. I learned from, let's say, the way when I finished my study back in the days. It's about the customer order decoupling point. All these things, I think those are basic elements. And still, sometimes I see that a lot of people will be, let's say, thinking about putting a lot of new stuff in. But still, all this kind of thing about segmentation, it's about on customers, but also on suppliers, and to get the right, let's say, to make a strategy. And somebody will say, yeah, well, if you don't have a strategy, it's also a strategy. I think it's about making decisions, because otherwise you'll end up with a lot of meetings, a lot of inefficiency. And at the end, we're all complaining about service levels and working capital. And maybe this is a way to, let's say, to improve. Yeah.
So we're almost at the end of the webinar. Yes, we have an extra 30 minutes extra. So I have some questions. From your perspective, what is your preferable S&OP maturity model you use and recommend?
Well, the companies I talk to are never on, let's say, maturity level 5. It will be, if you don't have any process in place, it's also, if you talk about 1, maybe it's from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3. Maybe for me, this is I think if you talk about this webinar, if we, again, Martijn, if you took to the supply chain flavor day, S&OP flavor day, some of the stories that you heard there are maybe 4 or 5, right?
Yep.
And I think a lot of things that we run into, if you look back to the roundtable we had in last year,
yep.
I think you agree that will be 1 or 2 or maybe a 3 on the table, right?
Yeah. So basically, that's the Gartner maturity level from 1 to 5. And on 3, you are doing S&OP by the book. And on 4, you are applying IBP, converted to finance. But in the end, this maturity model, I think, if it works for you, get rid of this maturity level. Make sure that you have these KPIs. Who is at the table, and are they participating? And do you make your budget at the end of the year? And is everybody happy?
Yeah.
And are the people you want at the table, are they still there next year?
Yeah.
So basically, are they the same ones still making their bets?
A lot of people are struggling to get it started, at least from my opinion. If you look to, let's say, the Dutch market, or at least this is a more international, but I think a lot of people are struggling to get it going. And it's about, let's say, it's a long term, but it's also a long term to keep it going. And you mentioned it in the webinar a couple of minutes ago, to keep everybody's attention, to make it relevant, and to make the right decisions. I think to break that through, that's not something you learn from the book. That's something to maybe you have to come up with maybe one set of, let's say, SKUs, or maybe 10 SKUs, or maybe one specific channel or whatsoever. But to keep the momentum going, or to keep everybody's attention, sometimes you have to be a little bit, maybe not via the normal rules. Maybe make something different, a different approach.
Yeah, I think the best way how to keep people happy. Like I mentioned, we are out of time, so we have spoken 60 minutes already.
Yeah.
So we will be there right after this. Slimstock has a lot of stuff how they can help apart from software. And yes, you see, you can download the book by Slimstock, but they also have a white paper. It's about Christopher Columbus, how to venture to new markets, etc. They have an S&OP readiness scorecard, so there is some real data behind it. But we didn't talk about that kind of stuff. So basically, I would like to thank the audience. A lot of questions, way too much, also about MRP and bill of material, that kind of stuff. So maybe you want to join us in the virtual lounge. So I'd like to thank the audience for listening in and sending in all these questions. And Jan, thank you for this interesting conversation.
Thanks, Martijn. Always happy to. 1 hour is, I think, less time to talk about all the nice things that we run into. But thanks again.
Yeah, and I also had a question coming in about Myers-Briggs. This is way too new. We only discovered it 2 weeks ago, and we did it because of the roundtable we did in the fall. So thanks for now. Next week we have one about the feminine touch in supply chain planning in the era of AI. Yes, because International Women's Day is coming up. So that will also be interesting. But for now, thank you, and maybe I see you later in the virtual lounge, and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.